Megan Wilson's stomach dropped as she stared at her phone in horror. The text message she'd just sent, intended for her best friend Jenna about her impossibly handsome but intimidating boss, had gone to the wrong contact. Her trembling fingers had tapped Richard Bennett instead of Jenna Bennett. 3 little dots appeared on the screen. He was typing a response. "Oh my God," Megan whispered, her face burning with embarrassment as she reread her own words. "That meeting today. All I could think about was how good Richard looked in that charcoal suit. Those eyes, that smile. I swear I couldn't focus on a single word he said. Is it wrong to have a crush on your boss? Especially one who probably doesn't even know you exist beyond your quarterly reports?" The 3 dots disappeared, then reappeared, then disappeared again. Megan's heart raced as she paced around her small kitchen, the sound of cartoons from the living room, providing a surreal soundtrack to her career's potential demise. Her 6-year-old daughter Charlotte, Charlie to everyone who knew her, was blissfully unaware of her mother's predicament, giggling at the television while clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. Finally, her phone chimed. "I think you meant to send this to someone else, but now I'm intrigued." "Which meeting were you in today?" Megan groaned. Of course he wouldn't recognize which meeting. She was one of over 200 employees at Bennett Investments, and she'd only directly presented to him twice in the 3 years she'd worked there. She was a mid-level financial analyst, practically invisible to someone like Richard Bennett, who had inherited his father's investment firm and transformed it into one of Boston's most successful financial institutions. With shaking hands, Megan typed, "Mr. Bennett, I am mortified. That message was absolutely not meant for you. I sincerely apologize for the unprofessional communication. Please disregard it entirely." She hit send and then slumped against the kitchen counter. Tomorrow would be excruciating. Would she be called to HR? Would he mention it, ignore it, fire her on the spot? Her phone chimed again. The quarterly projections meeting. Back row navy blue blazer asked the question about European market volatility. "I noticed you." Megan blinked at the screen. He had noticed her? Before she could formulate a response, another message came through. "And there's no need to be mortified. We're all human. Though I'm curious about the rest of what you were going to say. Was Richard Bennett, Billionaire CEO, Boston's most eligible bachelor according to last year's Boston magazine, and her direct superior, flirting with her?" Megan shook her head. That was impossible. Men like Richard didn't notice women like her. 32, perpetually exhausted single mothers with more student debt than savings. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Charlie's voice called from the living room, breaking through Megan's panic spiral. "Just a minute, sweetie," Megan called back, unsure how to respond to Richard's text. Professional distance seemed the only safe option. "Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Bennett. I apologize again for the inappropriate message. I'll see you at next week's department meeting." She hit send and set her phone down, determined to focus on making Charlie's dinner and forgetting the entire mortifying episode. She pulled pasta from the cabinet and started boiling water, willing her racing heart to calm down. The doorbell rang. Megan frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her townhouse in the modest Roslindale neighborhood wasn't exactly on anyone's spontaneous visit route. Through the window, she caught sight of a sleek black car parked at the curb, definitely out of place on her street. "I'll get it," Charlie called, already running for the door. "Wait, Charlie, let me check who it is first," Megan said, wiping her hands on a dish towel and hurrying after her daughter. Too late. Charlie had already pulled open the door, and there on the threshold stood Richard Bennett himself, his 6'3" frame nearly filling the doorway. His charcoal suit had been replaced by dark jeans and a casual button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned forearms. He looked even more handsome than he did in the office, more approachable somehow without the trappings of corporate power. "Hello," he said, his deep voice betraying surprise as he looked down at Charlie. Charlie, never shy, looked up at him with curious eyes. "Are you Mommy's friend?" Richard's eyes, a striking hazel that Megan had admired from afar at company events, lifted to meet hers. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I'm hoping so," he said simply. "Mr. Bennett," Megan managed, acutely aware of her faded jeans and Boston University sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "What are you doing here?" He held up a paper bag from an upscale Italian restaurant. "I was in the neighborhood for a meeting and thought you might want dinner." "Consider it an apology." "An apology," Megan echoed, confused. "For what?" "For making you uncomfortable. I realized after your last text that I might have crossed a line. His confident demeanor faltered slightly. I should have called first. This is presumptuous of me. Before Megan could respond, Charlie piped up, "Is that food? It smells good. And Mommy was just making me dinner, but yours smells better." Richard laughed, a warm, genuine sound that Megan had never heard at the office. "It's from Giacomo's. Best pasta in Boston. Enough for 3, if your mom doesn't mind me joining you." Megan stood frozen in her doorway, unable to process that Richard Bennett, her boss, a man worth billions according to Forbes, was standing on her porch with takeout, looking at her with those intense eyes that made her feel simultaneously terrified and thrilled. "Please, Mommy?" Charlie tugged at her hand. "I'm starving." Megan began, then stopped. Every instinct told her to politely decline, to maintain professional boundaries, to protect herself from whatever this surreal situation might lead to. But something in Richard's expression, a vulnerability she'd never seen in the boardroom, made her hesitate. "I have wine in the car," he added with a slight, almost boyish grin. "Red or white? Wasn't sure what you preferred." "Red," she found herself saying. "I prefer red." His smile widened, genuine pleasure lighting his eyes. "Good choice." As Megan stepped back to let Richard Bennett into her modest home, she had no idea that this mistaken text message would set in motion a series of events that would completely transform her carefully structured life. Nor could she have predicted that the man everyone at Bennett Investments feared and admired in equal measure had secrets of his own, reasons for noticing the quiet analyst in the back row that had nothing to do with a wayward text, and everything to do with a past that connected them in ways neither of them yet understood. The sound of Charlie's laughter broke the tension as she led Richard toward their small dining area. The space suddenly seemed cramped and humble compared to what she imagined was his usual environment. Richard's eyes swept over the framed finger paintings on the wall, the stack of children's books on the coffee table, the worn but clean furniture. Evidence of a life lived with love but without luxury. "Your home is lovely," he said, and something in his tone made her believe he meant it. "It's not much, but it's ours," Megan replied, feeling defensive despite herself. She had worked hard for everything in this house, had built this life for Charlie through sheer determination, after her husband Mark had walked out when Charlie was just 6 months old, claiming he wasn't ready for the responsibility. Richard set the food down on the small dining table and began unpacking containers of pasta, salad, and garlic bread. The rich aromas filled the modest space, making Megan realize how hungry she was. She hadn't eaten since a rushed lunch at her desk nearly 8 hours ago. "I'll get plates," she said, grateful for something practical to do. In the kitchen, she took a deep breath, trying to gather her composure. What was happening? Why was her billionaire boss in her dining room, setting out a meal as if this were the most natural thing in the world? When she returned with plates and silverware, she found Charlie already seated beside Richard, chattering away about her kindergarten class and the picture she'd drawn that day, of a purple elephant riding a rocket ship. "And Ms. Peterson said mine was the most creative," Charlie was explaining proudly, "because everybody else just drew regular elephants. But real elephants can't fly rockets, so mine was imagination." "Imagination is one of the most valuable skills in life," Richard told her seriously. "I built my business on imagining possibilities other people couldn't see." Megan set the plates down, struck by the genuine way Richard engaged with her daughter. No condescension, no adult talking to a child tone. He spoke to Charlie like her thoughts mattered. As she took her seat across from them, Richard looked up, his expression suddenly uncertain. "Is this okay, truly? I can leave the food and go if I've overstepped." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the confident, sometimes intimidating CEO she knew from the office. There was something almost vulnerable in his question, as if her answer mattered more than she could understand. "Stay," Megan said before she could overthink it. "But I have to ask, why are you really here, Mr. Bennett?" He smiled slightly as he poured deep red wine into the water glasses she'd set out. "First, please call me Richard, and second—" He paused, considering his words carefully. "Let's just say your text message made me realize I've been hiding behind my title for too long." Sometimes it takes an unexpected moment of honesty to shake things up. As their eyes met across the table, Megan felt something shift between them, a current of possibility neither of them had anticipated when they'd started their day. Outside, the autumn evening settled over Boston, and inside her small townhouse a story was just beginning to unfold. The dinner proved surprisingly comfortable after the initial awkwardness faded. Richard asked thoughtful questions about Charlie's school and listened with genuine interest to Megan's explanation of her role in the financial analysis department. As the evening progressed, Megan found herself relaxing, the wine warming her veins and loosening the knot of anxiety in her chest. "So," Richard said, refilling their glasses once Charlie had excused herself to play in her room after dinner, "how did you end up at Bennett Investments?" Megan traced the rim of her glass, weighing how much to share. "The usual way. I saw the job listing, applied, interviewed, and was hired. Nothing special." Richard's expression told her he wasn't satisfied with that answer. 3 years ago, if I remember correctly. "You came from Meridian Finance." She nodded, surprised by his knowledge of her employment history. "You've checked up on me. I make it a point to review the files of employees who impress me." He held her gaze. "Your analysis of the European markets last quarter was exceptional. You saw patterns others missed." Heat crept into Megan's cheeks. "Thank you. Though I'm still trying to understand why the CEO of Bennett Investments is sitting in my dining room on a Thursday night." Richard leaned back, something unreadable crossing his features. "Would you believe me if I said I've wanted an excuse to talk to you outside the office for months?" Megan laughed, then realized he wasn't joking. "No, actually, I wouldn't believe that at all." "Why not?" "Because," she gestured vaguely between them, "look at you and look at me. You're Richard Bennett. Your family has a wing named after them at Boston General. You dated that Victoria's Secret model last year. Yes, everyone at the office noticed, and I'm—" She trailed off, suddenly self-conscious. "You're what?" Richard prompted softly. Megan sighed. "I'm a single mum with student loans and a mortgage I can barely afford. I clip coupons and buy Charlie's clothes during sales. We exist in completely different worlds." Richard's expression darkened. "You think I'm that shallow?" "I think you're that practical," Megan countered. "Men in your position don't typically pursue relationships with employees who are one financial emergency away from disaster." The tension in the room thickened. Richard set his glass down carefully. "You've made quite a few assumptions about me," he said, his voice measured. "My turn for honesty now. I grew up with nothing." Megan raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Bennett Investments has been around for generations." "My father's company, yes, but I didn't grow up with him." Richard's jaw tightened. "My mother left when I was 8, taking me with her. She refused his money out of pride. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Dorchester. She worked 2 jobs. I didn't see my father again until I was 18. Megan's surprise must have shown on her face, because Richard gave her a rueful smile. "The public narrative is more marketable. The story of inheritance and dynasty. The truth is, I worked my way through college on scholarships and odd jobs. When my father died, I inherited a failing company drowning in debt. I rebuilt it from the ground up." "I had no idea," Megan said quietly. "Few people do. It's not something I advertise." He hesitated, then added, "There's something about you that reminds me of my mother. The same determination, the same quiet strength." Before Megan could respond, a small voice interrupted them. "Mommy, can you help me find Ellie? I can't sleep without her." Charlie stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Your elephant? I thought she was in your bed," Megan said, rising. "No, I looked everywhere." Richard stood as well. "I think I saw her in the living room near the couch. May I help look?" Charlie nodded solemnly, and to Megan's surprise, took Richard's hand as naturally as if she'd known him for years. Together they went to search for the missing stuffed animal, while Megan cleared the dishes, watching them through the kitchen doorway. Richard got down on his hands and knees to look under the coffee table, making Charlie giggle. "Aha!" he exclaimed, reaching beneath the couch to retrieve the worn grey elephant. "Is this the missing Ellie?" Charlie clutched the toy to her chest with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Mr. Richard. She gets scared when she's alone." "Well, we wouldn't want that," Richard said seriously. "Everyone needs someone to keep them company when they're scared." Megan felt something twist in her chest as she watched the interaction. There was a gentleness to Richard she'd never imagined existed beneath his corporate exterior. It made him more human, more real, and infinitely more dangerous to her carefully guarded heart. After Charlie was tucked in bed, Richard helped Megan finish cleaning up, their conversation shifting to safer topics. Office politics, Boston's brutal winters, their mutual love of historical fiction. It was nearly 11 when they finally ran out of reasons to keep talking. "I should go," Richard said, though he made no move toward the door. "Probably," Megan agreed, equally stationary. The air between them hummed with unspoken possibilities. Richard took a half-step closer. I'd like to see you again, Megan, not as your boss, as someone who enjoys your company. Megan felt her practical defenses rising. There are a dozen HR violations in that sentence. I'm aware. His smile was rueful. That's why I waited until after hours away from the office to say it. It's complicated, she protested weakly. Life usually is. He reached out, his fingers brushing hers lightly. Think about it. That's all I'm asking. After Richard left, Megan leaned against her closed door, her mind whirling. What had just happened? And what was she supposed to do about it? The next morning, Megan arrived at her desk earlier than usual, anxiety churning in her stomach. Would Richard act differently toward her? Would colleagues somehow sense what had happened? She kept her head down, focusing intensely on her computer screen. Wilson. Megan nearly jumped out of her skin at the sound of her last name. Patricia Hargrove, the department director and Megan's direct supervisor, stood by her cubicle with a stern expression. Ms. Hargrove, good morning, Megan managed, her heart racing. Bennett wants you in the executive conference room, now. Patricia's tone was clipped, her disapproval evident. Something about a special project. Whispers immediately broke out in the neighboring cubicles. Special projects from the CEO were rare and typically signaled either imminent promotion or termination. Did he say what kind of project? Megan asked, trying to keep her voice steady. No, but Walter from legal is there too. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Whatever you did to get on Bennett's radar, be careful. He doesn't tolerate failure. The walk to the executive floor felt interminable. Megan's mind raced through possibilities. Was this Richard's way of professionally distancing himself after last night? Or worse, had he decided she was a liability that needed to be managed? The executive conference room door was closed. Megan knocked tentatively. Enter, called a voice that wasn't Richard's. Inside, Walter Gaines, the company's chief legal counsel, sat at the table with a stack of documents. No sign of Richard. Ms. Wilson, please sit. Walter gestured to a chair. Mr. Bennett asked me to brief you on a highly sensitive matter. Where is Mr. Bennett? Megan asked, trying to mask her confusion. En route from the airport. His flight from New York landed 20 minutes ago. Walter slid a thick folder toward her. This is the Brunswick acquisition file. Mr. Bennett wants you to lead the financial analysis team. It's strictly confidential. Brunswick doesn't know we're considering a takeover. Megan stared at the folder in shock. The Brunswick Group was one of their biggest competitors. Acquiring them would be the financial coup of the decade. There must be some mistake, she said. I'm mid-level. This kind of analysis is handled by directors. No mistake, Mr. Bennett was quite specific. Walter's expression was unreadable. He said you have unique insight that would be valuable to this project. As Walter continued outlining the project parameters, Megan felt increasingly uneasy. Was this a legitimate opportunity, or was Richard using his position to keep her close? And if it was a real chance to prove herself, how could she be certain she'd earned it on merit, rather than through their personal connection? The door opened and Richard strode in, impeccably dressed in a navy suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. He nodded at Megan with professional courtesy. No hint of their dinner together visible in his expression. Walter, thank you for briefing Ms. Wilson, he said crisply. Could you give us a moment to discuss the financial approach? Once they were alone, Richard's demeanor changed subtly, his posture relaxing, his eyes warming as they met hers. Before you say anything, he began, this assignment has nothing to do with last night. I've had your name on the shortlist for this project for weeks. Ask Patricia. She fought me on it, insisted you weren't ready. Megan crossed her arms. And my accidentally texting you had nothing to do with your final decision. A flash of uncertainty crossed Richard's face. I won't pretend the timing isn't unfortunate, but I'm not offering you this opportunity because I enjoyed having dinner with you. I'm offering it because you're the best analyst for the job. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. I need to take this, but Megan... He hesitated, then continued more formally. Ms. Wilson, please consider the assignment on its merits. If you're uncomfortable, I'll understand. After he left, Megan opened the Brunswick file, her thoughts in turmoil. The data inside was complex, challenging, exactly the kind of analysis she excelled at. A successful project like this could fast-track her career, providing the financial security she desperately wanted for Charlie. But at what cost? And could she trust Richard's claim that the opportunity was based on merit alone? As she walked back to her desk, file clutched to her chest, Megan noticed Patricia watching her. a calculating expression on her face. Something told Megan that navigating her feelings for Richard might be the least of her problems in the days ahead. 3 weeks into the Brunswick acquisition project, Megan was running on caffeine and determination. The analysis was challenging but exhilarating, exactly the kind of work she'd always wanted to do. Her team of 4 junior analysts respected her leadership, and even Patricia had begrudgingly acknowledged the quality of their preliminary findings. Richard had kept his professional distance, their interactions limited to project meetings where he treated her with the same measured respect he showed other team members. No special attention, no lingering glances, nothing to suggest their dinner had been anything but a dream. Megan told herself this was for the best, even as she caught herself searching for him in the hallways or wondering if he thought about her when she wasn't around. "Earth to Megan," said Trey, one of her team analysts, snapping his fingers playfully. "You zoned out again. 3rd time today." Megan blinked, refocusing on the spreadsheets before them. "Sorry. What were you saying about the Brunswick subsidiaries?" "I was saying that something doesn't add up." Trey pointed to a column of figures. "Their Eastern European holdings are showing consistent growth despite the regional market downturns. Either they've got some miraculous strategy that defies economics, or the numbers are being manipulated," Megan finished, frowning as she studied the data more closely. "Good catch, Trey. Pull the raw market data for comparison and run a detailed variance analysis." As Trey left to gather the additional information, Megan's office phone rang. "Financial analysis. Wilson speaking." "Ms. Wilson, this is Diane from Mr. Bennett's office. He'd like to see you immediately regarding the Brunswick matter." Megan's stomach tightened. Had he already discovered the inconsistencies they were just beginning to uncover? When she arrived at Richard's office, his assistant waved her straight in. Richard stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor, his back to the door, tension evident in his shoulders. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Bennett?" He turned, his expression grim. "Close the door, please." Once they were alone, Richard's formal demeanor slipped slightly. "We have a problem. Brunswick somehow got wind of our interest. Their CEO just called to discuss potential synergies. Corporate speak for, 'We know what you're doing.' How is that possible? The team has been careful." "We have a leak," Richard interrupted, running a hand through his dark hair. "Someone on the inside is feeding information to Brunswick." The accusation hung in the air between them. Megan felt her defenses rise. "Are you suggesting it might be me?" Richard's eyes widened. "God, no. I trust you implicitly." He hesitated, then added more softly, "Maybe more than I should." The intimacy of the statement caught her off guard. Before she could respond, he continued in a more business-like tone. "I think it's someone with higher clearance, Patricia maybe, or someone on the executive committee who stands to lose influence if the acquisition goes through." "What do you need from me?" Megan asked, trying to maintain professional distance despite the current of awareness humming between them. "I need you to continue your analysis, but feed slightly misleading information through the official channels. Nothing that would compromise the actual acquisition, but enough to identify where the leak is coming from." Megan considered the implications. "That's a dangerous game to play with a project this size." "I know." His expression was troubled. "But if Brunswick fully understands our strategy, they'll structure their defenses in a way that could cost us millions, maybe sink the deal entirely." She nodded slowly. "I've actually discovered something that might be relevant. My team found inconsistencies in Brunswick's Eastern European financial reports. They're showing growth that doesn't align with market conditions." Richard's eyes sharpened with interest. "Fraudulent reporting? Possibly. We need more data to be certain, but it could significantly impact the acquisition valuation." A knock at the door interrupted them. Richard's assistant poked her head in. "Your 3 o'clock is here, Mr. Bennett." He nodded. "Thank you, Diane." To Megan, he added, "Keep digging into those inconsistencies, but be discreet. If Brunswick is manipulating their financials, they won't take kindly to being exposed." As Megan turned to leave, Richard called after her. "And Megan, be careful who you trust." The warning followed her back to her office, where she found Patricia waiting, a thin smile on her perfectly made-up face. "How's the Golden Girl?" Patricia asked, her tone just shy of openly hostile. "Another private meeting with Bennett?" Megan kept her expression neutral. "Project update, we're on track." "Interesting." Patricia examined her manicured nails. "I heard Brunswick might be getting cold feet. Market rumors suggest they're courting other buyers." The information was exactly the kind of thing Richard had just warned her about, a strategic detail that shouldn't be common knowledge. Was Patricia testing her or revealing herself as the leak? I hadn't heard that, Megan replied carefully. Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Well, you can't be expected to know everything, can you? Even with your special access to the CEO. The insinuation was clear. Heat crept up Megan's neck. I'm not sure what you're implying, but my relationship with Mr. Bennett is strictly professional. Of course it is, Patricia purred, though it's interesting that he drove to your house the same night you were mysteriously added to this high-profile project. My neighbor lives 2 streets over from you in Roslindale. She recognized his car. Megan felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her feet. You're having me watched. Patricia waved a dismissive hand. Don't be dramatic. It was a coincidence, but office politics is all about perception, Megan, and the perception is that you're sleeping your way into opportunities you haven't earned. Before Megan could respond, her cell phone rang, Charlie's school. Her heart sank as she answered. Miss Wilson, this is Nurse Brennan at Roslindale Elementary. Charlie took a fall during recess and hit her head. She's conscious but quite upset asking for you. We think she should be checked by a doctor. I'll be right there, Megan said, already gathering her purse and keys, panic rising in her throat. Family emergency? Patricia asked, not bothering to mask her displeasure. My daughter's hurt. I need to go. The Brunswick presentation is in 2 days, Megan. We can't afford any delays. Megan stared at her in disbelief. My 6-year-old is injured. I'll work remotely if necessary, but I'm leaving now. As she rushed toward the elevator, she nearly collided with Richard, who steadied her with his hands on her shoulders. Whoa, what's wrong? He asked, concern etching his features. Charlie fell at school. She hit her head. I have to go. I'll drive you, he said immediately. No, I have my car. You're shaking, Megan. You shouldn't be driving. Let me help. The genuine worry in his eyes crumbled her resistance. 5 minutes later, they were in Richard's Audi, speeding toward Roslindale Elementary. Richard drove with calm precision, occasionally glancing at Megan's tense profile. She'll be okay, he said softly. Kids are resilient. Megan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Her ex-husband Mark had never once left work for Charlie's emergencies. His career had always come first, until he'd finally decided family life wasn't for him at all. Yet here was Richard Bennett, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, dropping everything to drive her to her daughter's school. At Roslindale Elementary, they found Charlie in the nurse's office, a purple bruise blooming on her forehead, dried tears on her cheeks. Her face lit up when she saw Megan, then registered surprise at the sight of Richard. Mr. Richard, did you come to make me feel better too? Richard smiled gently. I came to make sure you and your mom got to the doctor safely. The school nurse raised an eyebrow at the interaction, but said nothing as she explained Charlie's fall from the monkey bars. She didn't lose consciousness, but protocol requires a medical evaluation for any head injury. I'll take her to Children's Hospital, Megan said, gathering Charlie into her arms. By early evening, they were leaving the emergency department, Charlie sporting a Batman bandage on her forehead and clutching a popsicle the nurse had given her. The diagnosis was a mild concussion. Nothing serious, but she'd need monitoring for the next 24 hours. Richard, who had waited patiently in the hospital lobby for 3 hours, stood as they approached. All clear? Megan nodded, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. Thank you for waiting. You really didn't have to. I wanted to, he said simply. Can I drive you both home? At Megan's townhouse, Richard insisted on ordering dinner for them, soup and sandwiches from a local deli that delivered. While Charlie rested on the couch watching cartoons, Megan and Richard sat at the kitchen table, speaking in low voices. I don't know how to thank you for today, Megan said. You must have had important meetings. Nothing more important than this. His gaze was steady, sincere. Megan, I need to tell you something. The night I came here after your text, it wasn't entirely spontaneous. She frowned. What do you mean? Richard took a deep breath. I've been aware of you for longer than you realize, not just as an analyst, but as a person. I noticed you at the company picnic last summer. You were the only one who stepped up to help when that intern's child wandered off. You organized a search party, found the kid in 10 minutes, and then went back to serving ice cream like it was nothing. Megan remembered the incident vaguely, but was confused by its significance. I don't understand. I grew up without a father, Richard said quietly. My mother did everything alone, just like you're doing for Charlie. She worked herself to exhaustion to give me opportunities. When I see you with Charlie, I see the same fierce devotion. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Your text message didn't create my interest in you, Megan. It just gave me an excuse to finally act on feelings I've had for months. Before she could process this revelation, her phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Trey, marked urgent. She opened it with an apologetic glance at Richard. "Oh my God," she whispered as she read the contents. "What is it?" Richard asked, instantly alert. "The Brunswick financial discrepancies. Trey found the source." She turned the phone so Richard could see the screen. "They're not just manipulating their Eastern European reports. They're running a sophisticated money laundering operation through their subsidiary companies." Richard's expression darkened as he scanned the evidence. "This changes everything. If Brunswick is engaged in financial crimes, the acquisition becomes infinitely more complicated. Or impossible," Megan added. "Taking on their liabilities could sink Bennett Investments. I need to call the legal team immediately. This information can't leave this room. If Brunswick suspects we've discovered their operation, they might destroy evidence, or worse." The gravity of his words sent a chill through Megan. "Worse?" Richard met her eyes, his expression grave. People who launder money at this scale aren't above threats or violence to protect themselves, especially with billions at stake. As Richard stepped outside to make his calls, Megan looked over at Charlie, peacefully watching TV, blissfully unaware of the dangerous waters her mother had just waded into. For the first time since joining the Brunswick project, Megan wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake, one that could threaten not just her career, but her family's safety. 2 days later, Megan sat in Richard's private conference room, surrounded by members of Bennett Investments' executive team and representatives from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. The evidence Trey had uncovered had been substantial enough to warrant federal involvement, and the Brunswick acquisition was now on indefinite hold. "Ms. Wilson," said Special Agent Keller, a stern-faced woman with shrewd eyes, "your analysis was instrumental in identifying this operation. The money laundering network appears to extend beyond Brunswick to several European banking institutions. We'll need your continued cooperation as we build our case." Megan nodded, acutely aware of Richard watching her from across the table. He'd been careful to maintain professional distance during the meeting, but his proud smile when she presented her findings had sent warmth flooding through her. "Of course," she replied. "My team and I will provide whatever assistance you need." "Excellent," Agent Keller said, closing her notebook. "We'll be in touch regarding formal statements. In the meantime, absolute confidentiality is essential. Brunswick executives don't yet know we're investigating." After the FBI representatives departed, Richard addressed the remaining executives. "This situation presents both challenges and opportunities. While the acquisition is off the table, we're positioned to expand into markets that Brunswick will inevitably withdraw from as this investigation progresses." Patricia, who had been unusually quiet throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. "And who will lead that expansion strategy? Given recent developments, perhaps we should consider leadership changes in the financial analysis department." Her gaze slid meaningfully toward Megan, the implication clear. Richard's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "That's an excellent point, Patricia," he said with deceptive mildness. "In fact, I've been considering our organizational structure. Would you join me in my office to discuss it?" As the meeting disbanded, Richard caught Megan's eye and gave a slight nod toward the small kitchen adjacent to the conference room. Once they were alone, he closed the door behind them. "Patricia's going to be a problem," Megan said quietly. Richard leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "Not for much longer. I'm restructuring the department. Patricia's talents would be better utilized in our Cleveland office." "You're demoting her?" Megan asked, shocked. "I'm reassigning her. There's a difference." His expression softened. "But that's not what I wanted to discuss. The FBI agent was right. You're in a vulnerable position now. Brunswick has powerful connections. Until arrests are made, there's a risk they might try to intimidate key witnesses." Megan's stomach tightened. "You think I could be in danger? I think precautions are warranted." Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I've arranged for private security to monitor your home discreetly. Agent Keller agreed it was a reasonable measure." "Richard, I can't afford private security. Bennett Investments is covering it as part of our cooperation with the federal investigation." His tone brooked no argument. "This isn't about us, Megan. It's about keeping you and Charlie safe." The mention of Charlie made any protest die on her lips. She would accept help if it meant protecting her daughter. "Thank you," she said simply. His expression remained troubled. "There's something else." Patricia knows about our connection. She's making insinuations to the board, suggesting your role in the Brunswick investigation was influenced by personal factors. Megan felt a flash of anger. That's ridiculous. I was assigned to this project before I showed up at your door, I know. Richard sighed. But perception matters in corporate politics. The timing doesn't look good. So what are you saying? He met her eyes directly. I'm saying we need to be careful, at least until this Brunswick situation is resolved and your position is secured. The pragmatic request shouldn't have hurt, but it did. Megan nodded stiffly. Of course. Professional distance. I understand completely. Megan. Richard reached for her hand, but she withdrew it, straightening her blazer with forced composure. It's fine, you're right. We both have too much at stake. She moved toward the door. I should get back to my team. They'll have questions about the FBI involvement. Richard didn't try to stop her as she left, which somehow made the ache in her chest even worse. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of FBI interviews, late nights compiling evidence, and trying to maintain normalcy for Charlie's sake. The presence of security outside their home was unnerving, but Megan was grateful for the protection, especially after a Brunswick executive was arrested and the company's stock plummeted amid rumors of criminal charges. Richard had kept his word about maintaining distance. Their interactions were strictly professional, limited to necessary communications about the investigation. Megan told herself it was for the best, even as she found herself missing their brief connection with an intensity that surprised her. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when everything changed. Megan had just put Charlie to bed and was reviewing case notes at her dining room table when her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw Richard standing on her porch, soaking wet, his usual composure notably absent. She opened the door cautiously. "Richard? What's wrong?" "Everything," he said, water dripping from his hair. "May I come in?" Once inside, he paced her small living room, running a hand through his wet hair. Brunswick's CFO was found dead in his apartment an hour ago. Apparent suicide, though the FBI is investigating. Megan sank onto the couch. Oh my God. This is bigger than we thought. The money laundering operation appears to be connected to several Eastern European organized crime syndicates. He finally stopped pacing to look at her directly. "Agent Keller called me. They're accelerating their protective measures for key witnesses." Fear coiled in Megan's stomach. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means they want to move you and Charlie to a secure location until the principal arrests are made. Probably for a week, maybe 2. I can't just disappear for 2 weeks. Charlie has school, I have work." "Megan," Richard sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "This isn't optional. These people have killed to protect their operation. I won't risk your safety or Charlie's." The gravity in his voice silenced her protests. She looked down at their joined hands. "Where would we go?" "I have a property in Vermont. Remote, secure, with enough space for you and Charlie to be comfortable. Agent Keller has approved it as a safe house." Megan pulled her hands away. "Your property? So we'd be staying with you?" "No," he said quickly. "I'd make arrangements elsewhere. The house would be for you and Charlie, with security personnel stationed nearby." The relief that flooded through her was immediately followed by disappointment, which she tried to ignore. "When would we need to leave?" "Tonight, ideally. I know it's sudden, but—" "Tonight?" Megan stood abruptly. "I can't possibly get everything organized that quickly. Charlie's medication, her school materials, my work files. I have people who can help." Richard's voice was gentle but firm. "Megan, I wouldn't ask this if it wasn't necessary, please." Looking into his concerned eyes, Megan realized 2 things simultaneously. She trusted this man implicitly, despite having known him personally for only a few weeks, and her feelings for him had grown far deeper than she'd been willing to admit. "I need to wake Charlie," she said quietly, her decision made. 3 hours later, they were in Richard's SUV heading north, Charlie sleeping in the back seat surrounded by hastily packed bags. 2 security vehicles, one ahead, one behind, completed their small convoy. The rain had turned to sleet, making the highway treacherous. "Thank you," Richard said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. "I know this is disruptive." Megan gazed out at the dark landscape passing by. "You don't need to thank me for wanting to keep my daughter safe." "No, but I'm grateful you trust me enough to accept my help." He hesitated. "These past weeks, keeping my distance, it's been difficult." She turned to look at him, studying his profile in the dim glow from the dashboard. "For me, too." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Patricia's been removed from the project. The board voted unanimously after reviewing her communications with Brunswick executives. Megan's eyes widened. She was the leak? Richard nodded grimly. She'd been promised a position with them once the acquisition went through, a significant promotion and salary increase. When our investigation threatened that, she began feeding them information about our findings. I can't believe she'd risk everything like that. People do surprising things when power and money are involved, he glanced at her briefly, or when they care deeply about someone. The implication hung between them as miles of dark highway disappeared beneath their wheels. Eventually, they turned onto a private road winding up into the mountains, the security vehicles maintaining their positions. Richard's property turned out to be a stunning modern lodge nestled among towering pines with expansive windows overlooking a mist-shrouded valley. Inside, it was warm and welcoming, with rustic yet elegant furnishings and a massive stone fireplace. "This is beautiful," Megan said as Richard carried a still-sleeping Charlie to the bedroom prepared for her. Once Charlie was settled, Richard showed Megan to the master suite. "You should take this room. It has the best security features, reinforced doors, direct alarm connection." "Where will you stay?" she asked, noting his luggage in the hall. "There's a caretaker's cottage about a quarter-mile down the road. I'll be close enough if you need anything, but—" He trailed off, his expression uncertain. "But maintaining appropriate distance," Megan finished for him, unable to keep a note of disappointment from her voice. Richard stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Is that what you want, Megan? Distance?" Her heart hammered in her chest. "No," she admitted softly. "But it's what makes sense, given our situation. Our situation has changed. Patricia's gone. The Brunswick acquisition is off the table. The professional complications that concerned me still exist," Megan interrupted. "You're still the CEO. I'm still an employee. And now we're isolated here together during a crisis. It's hardly the foundation for something real." Pain flashed in Richard's eyes. "Is that what you think? That my feelings aren't real? I think you've been incredibly kind and surprisingly genuine, but our worlds are still fundamentally different, Richard. When this is over, you'll go back to your life of board meetings and charity galas, and I'll go back to being a single mom stretching every paycheck." "What if I don't want to go back?" Richard asked quietly. "What if meeting you has changed what I want my life to be?" Before Megan could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. One of the security officers needed Richard's input on the perimeter monitors. He left with a conflicted glance back at her, the conversation unfinished. The following days established a strange new normal. Charlie, resilient as ever, treated the whole experience as an adventure, delighted by the lodge's game room and the snowy forest surrounding them. Megan worked remotely, coordinating with the FBI and her team at Bennett Investments via secure connections. Richard kept his promise to stay in the caretaker's cottage, but he spent his days at the lodge, playing board games with Charlie and working alongside Megan. In the evenings, after Charlie went to bed, they would sit before the fire, talking for hours about their lives, their hopes, their fears. She learned about his difficult childhood, his complicated relationship with his late father, his private doubts about the corporate world he navigated so successfully. In turn, she shared stories of her struggle as a single parent, her dreams for Charlie's future, her determination to create stability from chaos. A week into their stay, news came that the FBI had executed coordinated arrests across 3 countries, dismantling the core of the money laundering operation. Brunswick's CEO and several board members were in custody. The immediate threat had passed. "Agent Keller says you can return to Boston tomorrow if you wish," Richard told Megan as they stood on the lodge's deck that evening, watching snow fall gently through the pines. "The security team will remain in place at your home for another week as a precaution, but the high-risk period is over." "That's good news," Megan said, though she felt a surprising reluctance at the thought of leaving the cocoon they'd created here. Richard turned to face her, snowflakes catching in his dark hair. "Before we go back, I need to say something. You were right about our worlds being different, but you were wrong about one thing." "What's that?" she asked softly. "The idea that those differences matter more than what we found here." He gestured between them. "This connection, this understanding, it's not circumstantial, Megan. It's not crisis-induced or professionally convenient. It's real." He took her hands in his. "I don't want to go back to my old life either. The past week has shown me what I've been missing: genuine connection, purpose beyond profit margins, the simple joy of board games and snowball fights with Charlie." Megan felt tears prick her eyes. Richard, let me finish. I'm not offering to be your boss or your protector or even your boyfriend. I'm offering partnership, equal, honest, and real. Whatever challenges come with that, we'll face together. It won't be easy, she whispered, even as hope bloomed in her chest. The best things rarely are. His smile was tender as he brushed a snowflake from her cheek. Charlie asked me this morning if we could build a snowman together before we leave. I told her we'd have to check with you. She said, and I quote, "Mommy will say yes because she smiles different when you're around." A laugh escaped Megan despite her tears. She's observant. She's extraordinary, like her mother. Richard's expression grew serious. I'm falling in love with both of you, Megan Wilson, and I'm terrified you're going to tell me to go back to my cottage right now. Instead of answering, Megan closed the distance between them, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Richard's arms encircled her, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the snow continued to fall around them, transforming the world into something new and unexplored. Is that a yes to the snowman? Richard asked, his voice husky. Megan laughed, joy bubbling up from a place she'd thought long closed. It's a yes to a lot more than that. 6 months later, Bennett Investments announced a major reorganization. Richard Bennett would remain CEO, but was establishing a charitable foundation focused on supporting single-parent families and educational initiatives for underprivileged children. The new foundation would be headed by Megan Wilson, formerly of the Financial Analysis Department, now engaged to Bennett himself. Their wedding the following spring was small and intimate, held in the garden of Richard's Vermont lodge, now their family weekend home. Charlie, serving as flower girl, had insisted on a purple dress to match her stuffed elephant Ellie, who attended the ceremony wearing a specially crafted miniature bow tie. In her vows, Megan spoke of accidental text messages and unexpected visitors, of courage found in crisis and love discovered in unlikely places. Richard, in turn, promised to build 1,000 snowmen, to value family above fortune, and to never stop being grateful for the mistake that had brought them together. As they shared their first dance as husband and wife, with Charlie twirling happily alongside them, Megan reflected on the journey that had led her here. From a single text sent in error to a new life built on trust and partnership, proof that sometimes the most significant chapters of our lives begin with the smallest of mistakes, and that true wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts and everything to do with the people we choose to love.